Thanks very much. I'm Terry Lundgren, the chairman of the Economic Club of New York and executive chairman of Macy's Inc. So as a continuation of our breakfast series, I'm pleased to introduce our special guest, David Farr. He's the chairman and CEO of Emerson Electric, and he is the chairman of the National Association of Manufacturers. And we also have Jay Timmons here, and Jay is the CEO of NAM. Today, let me talk a little bit about Dave. He has for the last 16 years has been running Emerson, and this company has steadily transformed, like many of our industries have had to do, from a diversified manufacturing conglomerate into a highly focused global enterprise that provides innovative technology and services and solutions for customers in industrial, commercial, and residential markets. And in 2016, he led a number of strategic initiatives at the company to reshape it for the future. Its two key business platforms, automation solutions and commercial and residential solutions, delivered global sales last year of $14.5 billion, with international sales representing more than half of that business. He became CEO in 2000, and was named chairman in 2004. Emerson is one of a handful of companies that has consistently raised their dividend, now going on 60 years. Dave joined the company in 1981, was appointed president of Emerson's Asia Pacific operations. In 1993, it was based in Hong Kong for 4 of those years. He returned to the United States in 97 to oversee Emerson's process control business. In 1999, he was appointed to as Emerson's chief operating officer, a position that he held until he was named CEO. Dave's been an active member of the business and industry organizations. He serves as chairman of NAM, as we introduced him here, and he is on the board of directors of the U.S.-China Business Council, and he's also a member of the board of directors of IBM. He's also been very active in a wide number of civic and charitable organizations in his hometown of St. Louis, to the point where he was actually named St. Louis Citizen of the Year for his community leadership and charity activities. He received his bachelor's degree in chemistry from Wake Forest, and his master's degree in business administration from Vanderbilt. As a member of as a reminder of that this conversation will be on the record. And as always, be assured we'll end at 9 o'clock. So we'll come back and take your questions. But now, Dave, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Terry. It's good to be here this morning. It is kind of unusual with Emerson. Just give you an idea, I'm only the third CEO since 1954, before I was born. And so we've always had a process of having long tenure CEOs that can transform the company, sort of re-engineer the company and make sure it stays relevant. And it's a very important challenge, but one that I take very seriously. And I'm looking forward to the next several years as I pass this baton on to the next leadership team and make sure that it does well and has their chance to run it like I did. But being a CEO is just about to finish the 17th year as CEO next month, or this month, is very unusual in this industry. It's great to be here. It's good to have an honor to address the Economic Club of New York, a great honor. It's also to be here with friends and colleagues. And I'm a little bit surprised that so many people are out here for a tax reform speech this morning. I don't understand this, you know. There's a lot more exciting things in this world, but you never know. I want to thank Terry Lundgren for his kind introduction and everything at the Economic Club for organizing this event. As Terry said, I'm here in 2 capacities: as the chairman and CEO of Emerson, located in St. Louis, and as the chairman and board of the National Association of Manufacturing, as I refer to as NAM. The NAM is a unified voice of the manufacturers in the United States, from iconic global brands to family-owned small companies, led by our president and CEO, Jay Timmons, right here, who's here this morning. And also, we are advocates for over 12 million people within manufacturing in the United States. And it's important to have their voice heard, because we make things right here in America. And given the country's focus currently on manufacturing in our industry, there's a lot going on today, and it's really a great time to be the chairman of the NAM and have the ability to go out and talk. I've been in manufacturing my whole life. I grew up going to Corning Glassworks plants with my factory with my dad for over 20 years. My dad lived in upstate New York. He was born in Elmar, New York. He was a teacher, went to Syracuse. He went on and got his degree at Union College in math, went to work in plant floors at Corning. We moved around the world. I walked him every day with him. He finally retired after 36 years as a plant manager. And I remember seeing him one time. He said, "Dave, how did you ever become a CEO of a company when I was a plant foreman?" I said, your knowledge and your focus on education, which he gave to me. The manufacturing floor has changed dramatically over the last 36 years. And since I've been involved in the industry, we've grown from 14 billion up to 25 billion. And as Terry said, we made the decision to re-engineer the company and change it and focus it, and we took the company back down to $14 billion, where I started, which was quite a traumatic experience. We have more than 80,000 employees with operations in more than 150 countries. 80% of what we sell here in the United States, which is our largest market, around 45% of our sales, we manufacture right here in the United States. So we're really a global manufacturing company and a U.S. manufacturing company. Emerson primarily serves industrial and commercial customers in vital industries such as oil and gas, the chemical, food and beverage, power and water, life sciences, pharma, heating and ventilating systems, the cold chain, refrigeration, and many more, but clearly focused on industries around the quality of life that we see today. Nothing gives me more pride than seeing Emerson employees achieve and accomplish things that have never been done before. To make the world safer, cleaner, more efficient. Our world has changed dramatically in my years in manufacturing. And the work we have to do has changed just as much. Manufacturing skills have moved from manual to pneumatic to automation and to digital. A much more educated and skilled workforce is needed than 25 years ago when I started out. Combined with the new ways we gather and use information today, we're rethinking new and exciting manufacturing careers for people from all walks of life. We need a different workforce for manufacturing to be successful today versus 30 years ago when I started at Emerson. I know this manufacturing industry extremely well, but all my working years in manufacturing, I cannot remember a moment like this that we face today. We are standing at a real crossroads with a narrow window to deliver some major change for this great country. Significant reforms that will make life better for manufacturing workers, better for manufacturing communities, and better for America as a whole, and improve our global competitiveness. As a leader of a truly global American company, I can tell you the United States faces intense competition for our jobs, even my job, for our manufacturing businesses, and it grows fiercer and more competitive every day, every year. There is no question that our Washington, D.C. policies put America, companies like Emerson, and the employees and families in all 50 states at a clear disadvantage, a competitive disadvantage for America. The top corporate tax rate can exceed 39% when you add up all the federal and state and local taxes. The highest corporate statutory tax rate among the 35 industrial nations of the OECD, more than 50% higher than the average rate that we see around the world that we compete against. If you're like me, you look at these numbers and you ask, what are we doing to ourselves? And why? What are we doing to our people? Why in Washington, D.C. making it harder for us to win in this world? This is so stupid, so dumb from my perspective, and so self-destructive from my perspective. While the tax code is not the only problem, it is one of the biggest and most impactful from the U.S. manufacturer's perspective. But also important is excessive regulations on all manufacturing and industries. Regulation's important, but over-regulation is a big problem for American industry. America has some incredible advantages. Unparalleled resources and an unbeatable hard-working and dedicated workforce. But if we modernize our tax code for the modern company, If we let our companies compete on a level playing field, in the world we can lift up more families, invest in more communities, unleash the power of industry, and improve the lives of all Americans and this great nation. Create more long-term economic value for the people of the United States. If we had a better, more modern tax code, companies like Emerson could expand and hire more workers and help them get ahead. That requires embracing and adapting to the increasing global economy. We're all in the same big economic game, but the U.S. gets to write its own rules, and we need to write some new ones now. But why are we writing rules and regulations that give the other global competitors an advantage over Americans? If you're defending the current tax code, then you're defending a manufacturing worker in Ohio losing his or her job to a foreign worker. If you're defending the current tax code, you're having to defend years and years of mediocre economic growth, stagnant wages, and entire communities losing hope for future prosperity. If you're defending the current tax code, you're defending less innovation, fewer technological breakthroughs, less R&D, and fewer life-saving medical discoveries. In a country with so much incredible potential, it's indefensible to not have a current competitive tax code. But the good news, we can do something about it. And what are we to do about this? The time has come. First, we must make the federal corporate tax rate down, take it down to 15%, and lower the tax rate for 2/3 of manufacturers that pay taxes at individual tax rates as pass-through entities. It's a backward and unfair saddle that with marginal tax rate of up to 40% for these small business owners, it really hurts them. Small manufacturers are the backbone of our industry, and small businesses drive our economy. So it's time for the tax code to stop treating them like an afterthought, a huge negative in the U.S. economy. Second, we have to stop punishing global U.S. companies when they are reinvesting overseas earnings back into the United States. At Emerson, for example, more than 80% of our sales, or 50% of our sales in 2016 were outside the United States. And most of our competitors are based abroad. Since Emerson's headquartered in St. Louis, we pay taxes on overseas profits. When we bring them back home, we pay additional taxes. Foreign competitors do not. Another negative competitive disadvantage for us U.S. companies. That kind of tax structure puts Emerson at a disadvantage, and other global companies headquartered across America at a structural cost disadvantage. We can earn the same dollar as a foreign competitor, but if we want to reinvest in American facilities, in our American workers, in our American communities, we keep less of that dollar solely because of the U.S. tax system. The U.S. needs to catch up with the rest of the world and implement a territorial tax structure. We can create more jobs here while selling to overseas markets and growing our businesses and growing our communities and growing the U.S. economy. Third, we need a robust capital cost recovery system. As I explained to Congress a few months ago, a firm's capital cost includes the price of capital equipment, the cost of financing equipment, and the tax treatment of the investment. Faster capital recovery lowers the after-tax cost of these investments, makes them more profitable, gives us more money to reinvest in the U.S. U.S. investment normally translates into more jobs in America. Finally, manufacturing will be looking for a strong research and development incentive to any tax package, both R&D deductions and a strengthened R&D credit. So that is in the straightforward and smart tax pro-growth reform manufacturing want that America deserves. A fair corporate tax rate, fair rates for small businesses, a territorial tax system, a robust capital cost recovery, and a consistent long-term focus on R&D incentives to focus on America jobs. This is certainly not an easy lift in today's world, but it is possible. It is necessary and the right thing to do for the stronger, long-term growth-driven U.S. economy. And a 2015 NEM study concluded that reforms package like this could add more than $12 trillion to the U.S. economy, GDP over 10 years, deliver more than 6.5 million jobs in the U.S. economy, and increase investment by more than $3.5 trillion. As a global manufacturing CEO of 17 years, who makes decisions based on tax policy almost every day, I believe in this assessment. We look at these issues day in and day out where we invest our dollars as a company. Every CEO in the manufacturing world does this. Now, the good news is that we have the best chance in decades to get this done. The president wants to get this done. The vice president came to the NAM and told hundreds of manufacturers in person that tax reform will get done this year. And the U.S. businesses believe this, and we increased business investments already in anticipation of this happening. We have done that within our own company of this happening. The Speaker of the House told the same gathering in his first major address on tax reform that Congress is going to get this done. He's doing an event tomorrow with the New York Times on tax reform. So we will be watching, and leaders from the House, the Senate, and the White House have all come together to say they agree on the basic principles of tax reform. We now need real actions and results in 2017. Not later, but now. This can happen. The time is right, and we cannot let this critical moment pass. Manufacturers are all in for tax and regulation reform. I'm here today to personally challenge you, each and every one of you, to do something in your own power to make the case for tax reform. Our great country needs it to win globally, to grow faster, and to create more jobs for Americans. Talk to your congressional representatives. Write opinion pieces to news outlets and letters to the editor. Engage with the NAM, who will continue to drive this effort and bring all of our influence to bear on behalf of our industry, on behalf of communities, and on behalf of America's working families. We need real tax reform. We really need action now, not just talk. Ultimately, this is a question of values. Because the tax code is a reflection of what we value as a country, do we value American manufacturing workers and workers in all industries? I believe manufacturing, and I have lived it my whole life for over 50 years. I believe in American manufacturing innovation and drive to win and be the best in the world. I do it day in and day out, 365 days a year. Do we want to secure the jobs here? Do we want to raise the standards of living? Do we want to give the workers the best possible shot at making a good living and a good life? Do we want plentiful jobs for the next generation? I do. The current tax code says we do not, but I believe we do. So now is the time for action, and not just lip services, and not just hot air from Washington, D.C. politicians. I believe we want to give manufacturing here in the United States. We want it right here in America. I believe we want America to be the leader in the 21st century innovation, in medicine, in technology, in energy. I believe we want to reinvest in the promise of this country, because when American companies do well, they do good things, and the country does well. The most obvious way is through the jobs we create, pulling people in off the sidelines into productive jobs, lifting up communities that have been left behind in the past, and offering a ladder to people who want to move up in their careers and truly make something happen, creating wealth for themselves. American companies prove lies in other ways. A stronger manufacturing sector could also mean more of the life-saving, life-changing innovation that define our world. In companies we lead. In companies we lead, and customers we lead for them. There are children alive today because breakthrough delivery by U.S. pharmaceutical manufacturers. There are families that are safe today because the work of great automotive manufacturers to make the cars more protective and efficient. There are communities that are thriving today because of innovations that manufacturers have developed to improve some of the most basic areas of our lives. And yes, we're helping in the environment where innovation and technologies are important. This is one of my favorite parts. I'll give you an example from Emerson. At Emerson, we produce something that many people use in this world called the incinerator garbage disposal. New York's a little bit late to the party because of regulations. But they really are useful. And Emerson manufactures the incinerator garbage disposal. We made over 7 million disposers this year, which, by the way, is the only product of its kind where its assembly manufacturing is here in the United States. Our only competitor comes out of China, sells through one of the big box stores, and they get a free duty into the United States. But if we export to China, we pay 25% duty. That's an issue, a side issue. For cities across this country, trash is a serious problem. Across the world, it's a serious problem. And so much of the trash is food waste, with rots in landfills and increases greenhouse gases, methane gas, in fact. So Emerson had an idea. We started working with major cities like Boston, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee to encourage incinerator use so they could cut down on food waste in landfills, but just as important, and this is the most cool part of it, to recapture the methane and turn it into energy or turn it into fertilizer, to recycle the food waste back into useful energy and to fertilizer. It's a really amazing solution. It's just one small example of the creativity of American manufacturing. Emerson has recently invested significantly in our incinerator facilities in Wisconsin, with over a $30 million expansion and a new innovation and technology center. And we've also continued to invest across the United States, both in Minnesota, Ohio, and Texas, and other states. So we believe in American innovation. We believe in America and driving the world. But unlike other companies, Emerson and our employees know we have to also have an obligation to give back to the communities in many different ways. In our hometown, Ferguson, so I was right there in the heart of Ferguson during all this process. In fact, I always say 2 9-irons away, but it's more like a driver than 3 9-irons, but it's okay. There was a tremendous need a few years back. As a whole, the world saw clearly a few years ago, so in 2014, we dedicated, since 2014, dedicated over $15.5 million in programs that support the community and the families in Ferguson. We're connecting people to jobs by promoting STEM, focused scholarships in Rankin Technology College and the University of Missouri, right there located in Ferguson, and many other academic programs in supporting young kids to get out and have a chance to get ahead in life. In fact, the U.S. Department of Commerce just announced last week another $2.4 million on top of ours to support Rankin University in promoting and teaching technology and manufacturing jobs for that community. Our commitment in Ferguson extends beyond workforce development as well, in early childhood, development programs, a father support center, libraries, and local and national nonprofits doing transformational work across the community. We're looking for even more ways to be part of the revival in Ferguson. We've been in Ferguson since 1939, a long time. I'm very proud of Emerson's contributions, but I also know that we're not alone. Companies like ours, all sizes, big, small, are involved in communities across this country. They're trying to help give back to the community. It's part of our job as community leaders, as manufacturing leaders, as leaders in total. Emerson is and will be there to help with all rebuilding efforts relative to Ferguson. The same thing's going on in Houston right now. We currently have 9 facilities, manufacturing facilities, in the flood area. We currently have service centers. We have offices, technology centers. We're supporting the people. We're supporting the community as we give back to that community as they rebuild themselves. Also, our commitment to education and training in STEM goes well beyond Ferguson, to many millions of dollars to building strong relationships and programs across the country, around the world, relative to education and upgrading the education for all kids to have a chance in this world. In doing so, we are addressing the urgent need for manufacturing talent in the United States, the kind of work I talked about earlier. Research from Deloitte and Touche, the NAM's Manufacturing Institute, found that the U.S. will have about 3.5 million manufacturing job openings over the next decade. But about 2 million of them could go unfilled because of the lack of education, the lack of skills needed in today's workforce. American manufacturing cannot reach its full potential until our people can reach theirs. We need to invest in the next generation of manufacturing leaders, innovators, and workers. It is very important that we do this as manufacturing leaders, and we spend a lot of time on education. You ask any CEO how much time they spend on education in the communities, it's right at the top of the list. It is so important to our life and success in America. And I believe this, too, is at stake at the tax reform. Our ability to do more about good for America is tied to the ability to succeed in America, which is tied to tax reform. This is what our country is all about, people helping each other. We are seeing this live in Houston, across the Gulf Coast. Companies are part of the fabric of their towns and cities. Families are confident in their future. This is what America's about. We grow, we prosper, and we economically become stronger and stronger through our people and through industry. Our elected leaders have a chance to give them confidence and to do good for our country by empowering all of us to do well and support ourselves. We don't want government handouts. We want to create real wealth. We the people, all races, all ethnicities, all cultures, we want a chance to succeed and to grow and prosper and be successful. That's all we want. We know not all problems are solved in Washington, but if our leaders can improve the tax code for American business and American workers, we, the business community, will be able to tackle so many more of the challenges our country faces, for job creation, to community development, to health care, to education, to be a stronger, more prosperous country for all of us. We'll be able to promote innovation, opportunity, security, and growth, and uphold American values of diversity, inclusion, and respect. We'll be able to invest in the fabric of our nation and help build the future that all Americans deserve and want. We want a chance to succeed by ourselves. Securing the future of modern manufacturing means having a tax code that lives up to the realities of the modern world. And I hope you're willing to speak out and take a stand and show America that this should be all about not just money for businesses, but increasing economic prosperity for this country. It's about what we value as a nation. It's about helping all Americans have a better shot at a better life and a brighter future for America and themselves. So we need to get to work, and that's why I'm here today. I want to thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate your support, and hopefully you'll go out and pass the word. This is important to America and American manufacturing, and it's our chance to revitalize American manufacturing for the future of this country. With that, I open the floor to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. We can obviously feel your passion for tax reform, and I think that you share that passion with several of our members. I'm going to ask the first question, then I'm going to invite the fellows who are here, who are up-and-coming high potential individuals, both for our companies and our industries, as well as members potentially for the economic club, which basically means they're younger than we are.
You and I, yeah.
So the first question came from one of our online questions from one of our members, and that was, with all the changes in robotics taking bigger roles in manufacturing, even with tax reform, will there indeed be jobs to be created in the manufacturing world if tax reform is passed?
That's a question we get a lot as a manufacturer, and the answer is yes. Because what's happened is the manufacturing floor is changing, it's evolving, and what we see coming in as we bring the innovation in for new products, innovation relative to manufacturing, is a change of skill set of the people we need in the factory floors. People that can work with electronics, that can work with robotics, can work differently rather than the old days when I walked the floor as a young kid with my dad looking at people, person after person after person lined up. Today the innovation's around the people, and therefore the jobs are there, and the jobs are growing. It's just the education of those workers that's the key thing. And so that's, as a CEO, and every CEO you talk to relative to the world, in your world and my world, we're talking about how we need a different educated worker today, because the jobs will be there, and jobs will be created both at the factory, but also outside in support of that factory worker in the factories and what we're trying to do today around the innovation. So it's a different world, and we as America have to figure it out. It's not about low-cost labor. It's about productive, well-educated labor and workforce, and that's what it's all about today.
Fellows, any fellow members first? Do you have any questions? Open up to you first. Yes, Melanie?
Thank you. You briefly talked about the impact on labor and the qualified workforce. When we talk about education, we often focus on millennials and younger folks, but the reality is
it's everybody. Yeah.
It's everyone. So what do you see as corporates generations?
Good. A lot of things we have to do today, so as we rebuild, I'll just use the example of the incinerator or the disposer in Wisconsin, made right there. We're having to re-educate our workers. People have been working in the factory floor one way for 25 or 30 years. We have to send them back to schools. We work with the state. I was up in Wisconsin talking to Governor Scott Walker about expanding the community college programs right there in Racine, Wisconsin, to support us in what we have to re-educate our workers. So rather than just throw out people in 25 or 30 years of experience, we want to retrain them and re-educate them. You have the younger workforce coming in behind, but we have to change the skills. Because we as parents did a bad job. We as parents did not tell our kids to go into manufacturing to become engineers. We need to refocus that. So we're trying to re-educate not only the younger, but also the older people, and try to say manufacturing is not a bad place to go. It's a very good place. It's a good paying job. It's a stable job, and you can see the world. And so but it's a lot of bouncing back and forth. We put just as much money into retraining and education through community schools and the technical schools as we do the younger generation.
Was there another question? Yes.
In terms of tax reform, when you think about the other side, how are we going to pay for it? Are there any ideas? I mean, obviously, border-adjusted taxes
Correct.
sort of got taken off the table. Are there any other concepts of these pay-fors that you find troubling?
From my perspective, I start with get the rate as low as possible, and we'll take the trade-offs. We'll take the things, the deductions, the other benefits that we're being given as a corporation. So I think that I look at this and say, okay, start with a clean slate, get it as low as possible, and then based on what we have to have and can have, then that rate will alter. But from my perspective, I think everything's on the table right now relative to deductions, and I look at it, this is our chance to reset the whole industry and how we want money to be allocated into the economy. Because all these little crazy deductions and benefits and rules out there have altered the economy and where money flows. And I think the time, the responsibility for Congress right now is to say, okay, step back. We're in a different world right now. What's important for that next generation? Not what's important for this quarter or this year, but what's important for long term for the U.S. economy to be the most prosperous economy and the fastest growing economy in the world relative to the size of the economy. So I think that from my perspective, everything's on the table, and then we'll deal with this issue. And I think it's very, very important we say, okay, let's take it to 15% and then figure out, okay, how do we make this pay for it? Now, the big issue for manufacturers is we do worry about spending too much money. So our government today spends more money than the economy's growing, and that's a big issue. So we've got to get the economy growing faster to carry the costs that we need as an economy from the standpoint of benefits in welfare, the benefits in education, the benefits in defense industry, or emergencies like we have in, with the hurricanes going on right now. So there's a rebalancing that needs to be done right now. And the way we thought about this 20 years ago is different, and we need to really think hard about how the economy and how do we want to compete as a country going forward. And that's what they need to think about doing. But it's work. They need to work. But those things that CEOs like Terry and I think about every day, we survive as businesses today because we take tough actions and we think about what do we want to look like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. And we throw out a lot of things. For me to say that we're going to sell off a third of the company and get rid of all this industry that we had built together for many, many years, it's a tough call. But it was very important from time to time you do this to your business. You reinvent yourself to be relevant and to be strong. And that's where we are right now in the United States. We need to reinvent ourselves from a tax reform standpoint to be a stronger country to compete in the world. And that's why I think about it. Yes, sir.
I really enjoy your enthusiasm. It's overwhelming. But I'm going to say
I'm
something.
from the Midwest.
I have a kid that went to wash
I
in
don't
St.
watch
Louis.
TV, and I don't watch TV, you know?
I have a kid that went to school in St. Louis. He loved it. So I want to get something negative on the table for you.
I love negative stuff.
So
yeah.
I apologize. I apologize for the negative.
I don't care about negatives. I deal with
Listen,
negatives every day.
everyone agrees with the issues of tax reform and so forth. I don't think the ability to implement policy today is as simple as approaching the historic problems of either tax issues or regulatory issues or any other operational, financial, strategic, initiative that you're addressing. I think you're going to have to come up with a better mousetrap, and the mousetrap, it seems to me, and I'd love your thoughts, might involve bringing policy of social policy and business policy under one umbrella. Because if you can't do that,
Wow.
the right and the left don't communicate, and they're never going to communicate. And we have a broken system. So how do you bring social issues? The only thing I think about is, I was saying to some of my friends here this morning, that if you look at Silicon Valley, nobody copies Silicon Valley, whether it's Stanford, and I didn't go to school at Stanford, I went to another school, but be that as it may, I think
couldn't get a job.
I couldn't get it.
Okay.
I couldn't get a job there. But the thing I find really remarkable is that nobody copies that model of California, Silicon Valley, Stanford, all the FANG stocks, and the value they've created is unbelievable, and the employment growth. So the question is, how do you attack policy in a more centrist mode?
Well, you know, it's,
And it's really critical,
if I
because
had that
I don't.
answer, I'd be a gazillionaire, I would say, but...
You would be a zillionaire.
Yeah, I'd be a gazillionaire. Way past a billionaire. But, you know, from my perspective, that's what we, as business leaders, that's what we do. We balance the trade-offs between the business. You know, we look at shareholders, we look at employees, we look at customers, we look at the government and all the different things, and we try to balance that in the community. And I think that more and more CEOs are talking this way relative to, we need to think about all aspects of the equation, not just the right side of the equation. So I think that that is a tough issue, given the fact that we have a political structure today that's been, many people have been in politics for their whole life, and you know, they lived it this one way. I believe in America, and I believe that people, the individuals, are voting and saying, hey, we want to change. And that's why you're seeing such turmoil relative to elections. Because I think the individuals, I know in the Midwest, they want it done differently. They want the perspective of industry or manufacturing or jobs. They want to balance with the social issues. They really do want this balance. And I think that all countries go through evolutions. This country's been able to survive for a long, long time. I believe we will get through this. It is very painful. The fact that it's so painful right now tells you that change is needed. And I think as a nation, we will rise to this change. We will. Now, it may be painful for the next 10 or 12 or 15 years, but as a country, we will not roll over. And I think, so I'm optimistic about this. Yes, that's a negative issue. And people say, well, how can Congress focus on all the issues they need to deal with immigration, with tax, and with the budgets and stuff like that? That's their job. That's their damn job. And they need to step back and think about what's right for the country rather than what's right for themselves. And I think that the world's, inside the political world today, people are thinking that way. Now, it's going to be painful, because today's world's different than 100 years ago, called the press, called instant gratification, iPhones, or whatever you want to call them. And so I think that the world has to watch this, and it's going to be very painful. I personally believe we will get that balance right. It won't be like California. I hope it won't be like California. I'm from the Midwest. I think we have a pretty good solution in the Midwest. But I think we have to rebalance what we see as priorities today, sir. I think you're exactly right. And if you stayed in Wash and went to WashU longer, you'll learn that. Yes, sir.
So on the theory that two negatives make a positive, I'd like to also ask something that might be negative. One major issue is that the United States has faced is that manufacturers have moved a lot of basic manufacturing abroad. And the border adjustment tax is now off the table, but many foreign countries give explicit subsidies. Taiwan Semiconductor,
Correct.
China gives explicit subsidies to their semiconductor industry, et cetera, some of the more high-tech areas of manufacturing. Do you and does the association support any specific tax advance, any specific tax component outside of the border adjustment tax to equalize that? And would you like to see that as part of tax reform?
Well, within our members, you think we have, well, how many companies do we have? 12,000, 13,000, 15, 14,000? That's a very challenging issue because of all the different industries we face. But as a company, okay, and I manufacture companies. I manufacture around the world. I have a lot of plants, 150 plants around the world. Plants can be moved. If you put the right incentives in place from a tax reform standpoint and the right incentives relative to education and all the things that we deal with from a standpoint of how we evaluate, we can move jobs. And we have moved jobs, and we continue to move jobs. So I think that if you put the right economic structure in place, in a matter of time, you will see those jobs move around the world. We move jobs constantly. I've moved jobs out of China, I've moved jobs into Mexico, I've moved jobs out of Mexico, moving back to the United States. Over time, as I told the Speaker of the House, I need a period of 2 to 3 years, and I can rebalance the formula relative to the economic formula to the trade-offs of where we manufacture and how we do things. We are a global company, so we have to manufacture around the world. But I think that having special one-time off tax structures to help American companies will backfire. And this is my opinion. Then other countries will do it. And then you have this rapid change and nothing will get done. I fundamentally believe you have to change the whole economic proposition, not with one-off special deals, but with a structural change. And that's where other countries have gone over the years. Yes, China started with special incentives, but those disappeared. And they're trying to change now where they want people to invest. Because we've been investing in China since basically for 35 years. We've been there a long time. And I think that the way you do it is you think about long-term, how do you want structurally, what's the social balance, what's the economic balance, and how do you want to incentivize the industries to invest? And that's the key issue. But keep in mind, jobs can move. Factories can move. Now, maybe not whole house. People have this envision that we just take everything. We might take a third of that. We might move a third. We might move 40%. We might move 50%. We rebalance it all the time. So if you have the right structure put in place, and stop companies from wanting to leave the country, which is a real painful experience too, to watch because of tax inversion. That's a big problem in itself from my perspective. So I think that you get the right structure in place, the right thought in place, the right balance of the social and the businesses and the economics, you watch American industry, they'll move, they'll succeed. This is the biggest market in the world. And if you could grow this economy faster, you'll find more people wanting to invest in here. Why do you think Europeans are investing in the United States right now? Because it is a vibrant economy and will be the vibrant economy for a long, long time. So, I mean, I think it can be worked. And I don't like special one-offs. I think that's a tough issue to deal with. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. As a longtime shareholder of Emerson Electric, and we sold our company to your predecessor, Chuck Knight.
So what company did you sell to us?
Zomox, it was a process.
I call them Oxmox. Yeah.
Oxmox, absolutely.
It was the first company I sold when I became CEO.
Story of life.
That's okay. It was a great company.
Absolutely. And I know who sold it.
Zomox in Cincinnati.
Absolutely. Lawson Reed. Absolutely. So the question I have, like most companies in the United States, revenue growth has been a real issue. Right. Bottom line growth, and to some extent, the tax issue translates into bottom line growth. The real issue is revenue growth. Right. And the question I have is, can you tell me again how the tax incentives that we're talking about is going to enhance Emerson's revenue growth? Let me just start with one you know very well, Emerson's revenue growth. I've been a shareholder for many years. That's been the one knock on Emerson all the way through. Correct. Is revenue growth. So can you help me with that part of it?
If you look at the business industry we serve, and from my perspective, what we look at is additional investments, so business investments, which we as a country have really lagged behind for too long now. So from my perspective, if the individual companies have more money to spend and they can have a faster recovery relative to the depreciation of the investments, they'll have more money to invest, and that will drive incrementally higher growth for the industries which we sell into. So for automation or for commercial residential or the food chain. And then by having more, obviously, growth that way, you're going to create more jobs, which puts more money back into people's pockets, and they'll spend it. From my perspective, I look at it from a business, and I look at where businesses in the United States have underinvested. So why did we run into countries like China? Why did we run into countries like India? Because business growth was so strong. So there was a period there in the 90s and 2000 time period, China, we saw underlying economic growth and business spending 25, 30, 40%. And so we ran to that to invest in those countries. So from my perspective, what we need to do is figure out how do we get our growth rates back up in the investment, in the economic investment of business spending. And that's what will drive Emerson. And by the way, we're at 64 years of increased dividends. Hopefully before I retire, we'll make it 65. So right there. But that's how I look at it from a business perspective. They'll spend more money. And that's what I see in my own business today, inside Emerson today, too.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I fully support the comments you've made about tax reform, but I think all of us have a hidden tax. And I think you, too, have this hidden tax based on what you've said about educating workers.
Correct.
We have a totally failed education system, and we're paying for it twice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would hope that in addition for the passion for tax reform, we have a passion for education reform, so that we do have the workers who can come in and then be trained for specific jobs, but not having to be taught. I mean, all the investments in the communities are appropriate, but we're also doing the education job.
Correct. I think that from my perspective, going back to the current president and the councils he put together, which now have been falling apart because of other issues, there are 4 issues we focus on as CEOs: tax reform, regulation reform, infrastructure, and education. The CEOs, the business leaders, the community leaders know we have a failed education process here. So from the standpoint, you take what happened in Ferguson, and I saw all these kids. I spend more time in Ferguson, Missouri than I did in my home little city, because I travel back and forth, and I've been doing it since the early 80s. So the issue was, we saw kids that would just drop out of school. They didn't get jobs. They got caught up in the crimes. They got caught up in the bad parts of life. So the whole focus is, how do we get those kids back into the education? So we pulled together and said, we'll go out and raise $20 million for this community for technology investment for the Rankin School of Technology, and we'll build classrooms right there. Or we'll take kids and move them somewhere else within the city, but the whole idea was to teach them skills and then get them to come back into the community to live in that community. I couldn't get the government to do it, to support us. I said, I'll raise $20 million, you put 10 in. Now, we just got $2.5 million, but it took how many years? That's since 2014. So the issue really boils down to, I think businesses know, for America to succeed, for innovation and to be successful, we have to figure out this education. Now, I think there's always going to be 2 paths in education. I don't think we're ever going to solve the path that sits out there. It's just, you can't change it forever. But I think we can create an environment where we can educate more and more workers inside, or more and more people inside the community. So my wife and I have been huge supporters of KIPP, Knowledge is Power schools in St. Louis, as we come into St. Louis. And those kids come out and they go into the universities and they come back into the community. So my focus has always been, how do we get these kids educated and get them back into the community to create that quality of life that we need for that stability of life. But boy, we'll be fighting this one long past my life. But as I said to him, I think America will not give up because they know education is so important. As leaders, we know education is important, and we will not walk away from it. There are a lot of people who say, oh, we'll just walk to other countries. And then they get in other countries and say, we've got the same problem. And so I think it's something we can work on and we'll continue to work on. It's always in my back of my mind. Yes, sir. You had a question? Yep. Then I'll come over here.
Let me give you a hypothetical that may be real. You're in the Oval Office, and the
I've
president.
never been to Oval Office.
No, the president says you're chairman of NAM, and you're concerned about jobs in the Rust Belt. I'm concerned about jobs in the Rust Belt.
Upstate New York.
You bet, all across,
Yeah.
right through, even down to Missouri, and I can repatriate the trillions abroad. I can cut the tax rate on your business down to 25%, let's say, maybe in 20. Or I can have immediate depreciation of capital investment. But I'm told there are the deficit hawks in the House, and Ryan tells me we can't do them all. What would your trade-off be with respect to jobs in the Rust Belt? Which would you say to the president, this is the one, or which mixture would you recommend?
I will err on the side, because I grew up in this side. You drive faster growth, you'll drive more income, more wealth, and that will solve the problem of having more money to spend in this deficit. So I'm a firm believer that we've got to figure out how to drive the growth to the spending level we need to get to. And it's not going to be just taking more money away from everybody, but figure out how to create a bigger pie. So I'm the balance that if I was in the Oval Office, I say, how do we increase the pie? And then how do we increase that pie? Then we can figure out how do we spend that pie. Because just like businesses, we as a government need to think about where do we spend today for the future? We are spending on things we don't need to spend on anymore. And so you have to reallocate, just like we do in businesses. Governments have to do the same thing. Where do you invest today for the future? And you're going to have to say, oh, we've been doing this since 1492. Well, it's time to change. And so from my perspective, I think we have to err on the side of, okay, let's get faster growth. Let's figure out where we need to spend money and don't need to spend money. And then if we drive that growth, we'll drive the increased revenues. And it's a fine line, a balance. And I'm not saying crazy try the deficit out of kilter, but at the same time, I realize right now that our underlying inherent growth in the U.S. economy is too low for what we need to spend as a nation. So we need to figure out how do we get that growth rate up to drive the whole value of the nation and to drive those jobs and to drive that wealth creation and get that pie bigger. So that's where I will err on the side of, as a president, get that going. My trade-off might be I might spend a little bit more from a deficit standpoint, but I'm also going to look at where do we spend money today and where shouldn't we spend money today.
Which would drive between immediate acceleration of capital investment, depreciation of capital investment, and lower rate?
The depreciation will have a faster impact from day one, but the incremental impact will slow down. So you may, in the first 12 to 18 months, if you gave me 100% depreciation, and it will impact me faster, so that's a big bump. But then at the same time, the impact will slow down because I will run out of what I'd say incremental projects, and I can only do so many projects at one time. But the fastest impact would be the depreciation side, what I would say a consistent, relevant R&D tax credit approach, rather than you have it today, no, you don't have it. Yes, you have it, no, you have it. So I think the depreciation side is the quickest from my perspective. But I think that you're going to have to look at all the things. You're going to have to look at that tax rate, what benefits you've given companies like mine or other companies, and then where we spend money as a government. Because I think we really need to think, going back to the question the gentleman asked over there from Stanford and WashU, was how do we balance the social issues with the business issues, with the economic issues, and with the government issues? It's a fine line, but we need to step back and rethink the way we do this, which is unfortunate today. We do it live. Everything. I mean. And if you watch me make my decisions live, it'd be ugly, to be honest. But that's why I don't let cameras in the room when I'm making decisions. Over here first, and I'll go over here.
To what extent, if any, are you aware of any economic or other studies that support your position that a lower corporate rate will help the lower economic levels and more disadvantaged members of our society?
There are a lot of studies out there. One of I've mentioned in my report, there's 2 studies out there that are available to talk about this, that through the lower tax rates, the incentives, and the investment increase, the employment increase. So there are studies that say you can do this, there are studies you can't do it. But I fundamentally believe in looking at businesses that if the studies show that if we do allow more money to stay in the pockets of businesses and individuals, that money will go back into it. Because as this shareholder said to me, I want you to grow faster. The way I grow faster is I have to invest. And cutting constantly is not going to drive my growth. I have to invest. And the way I invest is I have more money to invest in my pocket. And so I think that the studies show that if you have that money sitting there, that you will see people invest. And you will see people, because we want to grow, we want to prosper, and we want to create that economic umbrella. And there's studies in there. You just look at there's a copy back there on the tables of my speech. You'll see that I referred to 2 studies in there from that perspective. So it's an important thing. We've got to grow this country back to where it should grow. Yes, sir.
You talked principally about how the tax system disadvantages U.S. manufacturing. One of the main points the administration has made is that the trade system globally disadvantages American manufacturing, and their emphasis has been in part on renegotiating trade treaties. So NAFTA is in the works. There's been talk of higher tariffs on Chinese goods. You could argue the border adjustment tax is a form of protectionism, although that's debatable. So I wondered if you could talk a bit about whether you think the global trade system is unfair and whether it needs redesigning as well, not just tax.
I wouldn't classify the global trade is unfair. I think the global trade is changing, just like we as a nation's changing, global trade's changing. So I gave an example of the disposers that we manufacture here in the United States. We're the only one that manufactures them. So when we want to export those into countries like China, we pay a 25% duty. The Chinese competitor we have that sells in a big box store here in the United States pays no duty. So I think that we have to look at how things are moving around the world today versus 30 years ago. When I started at Emerson, how we found out about things? We got a fax 4 or 5 days later. Maybe a fax 4 or 5 days later. Today I'm on the phone 24 hours a day finding out how things flow around the world. So I think that what the President and the White House are looking at right now is how do we rebalance these things? But it's very difficult to do, to go back and to look at trade agreements. Look what's going on with Brexit, how hard that's going to be. And I think that NAFTA is a great agreement. It just needs to be tweaked and fine-tuned is my perspective. Just like all agreements need to be looked at and said, just like companies have to be looked at and how we do business. So I think that, yes, trade is good. Trade's very good for America, and we succeeded at it for many, many years. The question is right now, do we need to think about what are some of those pluses and minuses in the trade and what's working and not working? But it's a very complex issue because you're dealing with nations and sometimes trade agreements among multiple nations. But I think that it's something you always have to look at, just like we look at from inside our company, how are we doing things and what, what's the right structure. But I can see what over time what happens is we see competitors emerging because they see a loophole in a structure because America's wide open for trade. They say, hey, we can do that and go right in. Same thing happened in NAFTA. NAFTA was created for a joint relationship between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And then all of a sudden, all the European people and the foreign people saw, or Asian people saw, go to Mexico, we can get the United States easier and cheaper, lower cost. So those are the things that, consequences that happened, started 25 years ago that we need to rethink about how we go about that. And I think one-off special taxes or whatever you want to call them, import taxes, aren't the best way to go. Think about the economic trade-offs. It's not easy to do, though, because it's very challenging, but it's got to be looked at. Because trade's important. Trade does create. America has done very well with trade over the years. Closing the borders is not the right thing. How do we look at the borders is very, very important. Last question. Yes, sir.
I'm going to change the subject just a second. So going back to manufacturing, the importance of manufacturing in the U.S. and abroad, and it's maybe more a question for the CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers. The question is how do you really promote manufacturing as a career opportunity early in the process? And what I mean by that is I come from an accounting background. We promote accounting, we do all kinds of fellowships and stuff. It really isn't a manufacturing major in college that I'm aware of. And when you look at competition at the MBA program, it is 10% going into manufacturing coming in. Okay, so I'm just saying, I just think if you're thinking about the broader issue, there needs to be much more of a promotion in terms of the importance of manufacturing to society and that there's a career opportunity for people that really want to get into that.
Okay, my way was when I was young, my dad dragged me to the plant, so I saw it, and I wanted to be in manufacturing. The way we do it today is we call them STEM programs. So we have STEM days in all our facilities, where we take the young kids, the parents take their kids to work, and they see, hey, this is pretty cool. My dad and mom sitting around meetings all day long. That's pretty cool. Or they do this in engineering. I think that what we need to do is we have to educate the kids at a younger age that manufacturing, jobs in manufacturing, be it in design work or manufacturing work or whatever aspects of the work you want, are interesting. And get engaged. Stop being parents that leave kids alone and say, hey, do what we want to do. And don't be helicopter parents, but at the same time, get engaged. So what we do at the NAM is we have manufacturing days. And so we're out promoting manufacturing, and we try to get people to go to manufacturing. And many executives like myself now are developing engineering scholarships and STEM scholarships. We're trying to get people to think about it. Don't go to school to be accountants. We need accountants. Don't go to school to be tax lawyers. We need tax lawyers, but we need less of them. Let's have engineering. Let's create some things rather than accounting things. Let's create, then you can count. Okay? And so I'm going to reverse it. I want to create it in accounting. So Jay, what would you say?
I'm going to let that be the last word.
Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. That was great. And Jay, thanks for your being here and for the role you both play in helping create these manufacturing jobs as we go forward. We'll just cut this short and just say, keep your eye on the website. Lots of very exciting things ahead of us in terms of presentations. We have Bill Dudley of New York Fed coming to talk to us. We have the governor of the National Bank of Belgium. We have CEOs from IBM, Walmart, AT&T, CVS, all here in the next several weeks. So please join us. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks again, Dave.